Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Doug Jenkins. I want to do a video today on mixing. I know I haven't really done the beginning stages of mixing, and some, you might be an advanced user mixing and you might pick up some tricks from me, and that's the cool thing about mixing. I mean, nobody knows everything. There's so many different functions with the hardware, with the plugins that we use today, with the system. So I'll talk about the system that we use, why we chose it, and then I'll talk about, and I'll go through a session. This session was sent to me by a producer named Jimmy Lucas, very, very loyal client of mine. He's been sending me stuff, and we try to do the best we can with everything we're given. One thing I've learned in music is once you get a little bit better, you get an understanding of what you're doing. Let me sit down. Let me sit down here. But once you start understanding what you're doing, you can start to make better decisions. I think it took me at least 9 years to even get in the ballpark of trying to be professional with this. I see myself succeeding more in the two-bus stuff, so a lot of people were sending me mastering work, but mixing has become a mainstay for me as well. Any mastering engineer should be able to mix, but we're listening for something totally different. In mastering, you have the whole image together. You have everything the way you want it in the song. In mixing, on the other hand, the song isn't. You can bring definition to parts in the song, and I'm going to show you here in a minute, where we're going to run it live feed and everything so you can hear it professionally. But we want you to hear the difference, that just the subtlest differences in the actual instrumentation can play such a huge role in that song. Hold on, I think this is a customer. Hold on a second. Hello.
Yeah, this is Doug from iMixandMaster.com. I'm trying to get my album to sound like that last Katy Perry album.
Get the wrong number.
We do jazz
Who's
music.
this?
Yep. Would you be able to make it sound like that last?
Oh. Yeah, I'm in Ohio.
Okay then. Wrong number.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That was the weirdest thing ever. Anyways, they must have got the wrong business number or something. But anyways, what I was saying about mixing is the art form of taking and creating space between the instruments, where mastering is in a sense the same thing, but there's a lot of times where we can't really get too in depth. And what I mean by that is maybe you had a synth part that would have been awesome if we just rolled it off to around 4K and let it take up the high end. But if you sent that to me where you didn't do that, there's still that low end muffle down there that we should have taken care of in the mix. And therefore, when I compress it with, say, a very high end mastering multi-band, I'm controlling everything with it. So in mastering, the big purpose of mastering is to be able to increase the volume, the dynamics, and bring a lot more energy to the song. Bring the fullness out, the image out, the clarity, take away frequency ranges that are building up, and listening for something totally different. That's why most of the time, if I'm going to mix your song, I'll take 3 or 4 days off and then master it if I have to. But a lot of times we want to change the outcome. I don't care how great of an engineer you think you are. If you're listening for bass lines and snare drums and hi-hats and the dynamic balance between those instruments, and you're not really paying attention to the overall sound, you are going to have a frequency range that's a little bit bigger than it should be. I'm going to tell you that right now. That's where a mastering engineer comes in and instantly hears the song for the first time and goes, well, 400 hertz is way too heavy. If we cut that down, your whole entire song will come up. And then you can turn it up. And then all of a sudden, the mastering engineer looks like the hero over the mixing engineer. That's why the mixing and the mastering, they're not a ball of stuff. I think a lot of guys go, how much for mixing and mastering? Well, the service that we offer is in between both. So you have, on the one end, you have mixing. On the other hand, you have mastering, where we created a stem session. So the stem session was for the home-based crowd. Hey, I have my track the way I like my track, so let's just send you stems, the drums, the vocals, the guitars, the bass, the synths, and those are my 5 to 6 stems. And then we can take them and run them through hardware, EQ them correctly, create space between these different instrument groups, and then therefore you have a great track. Mixing, on the other hand, this is considered a stem session to me because there's like 9 tracks. A mixing session, on the other hand, you're talking 64 tracks, maybe 20 tracks, 24 tracks, 30. What I'm trying to get at is it's multiple things. So if in mixing, we're going to go through this and we're going to talk about this like mixing, what we did to this song. So let me zoom in on it. You know, quit jabbering my mouth and talk about the fundamentals of mixing today. And I think you guys should get a pretty good representation of what it's all about. So we're not going to run the screenshot, I apologize. The system we're using is Pro Tools HDX, and right now I have to figure out how I can, it's a new addition to our studio. Why are we using that? Pro Tools HDX has its own DSP power. It is a significant card with humongous increases in sound quality. I to this day have not heard anything that makes my system and my audio sound that much better. When when you're using something like this, if you look at the playback engine, it's HDX. You're literally using the card's power instead of your computer's power most of the time. And what's so cool about that is these plugins were specifically designed to work with that card. So yes, it does make a difference. It's like putting diesel fuel in a, you know, a lot of these native plugins, which native means it's just VST, RTAS. But when it's native like that, sometimes you'll get a bad plugin. I mean, you'll get a plugin that just really is not doing what it should. Now, with the day and age of 24-bit, 64-bit architecture, you're looking at things that look a lot closer to the actual piece of hardware that you're emulating, because everybody's picking off of something. And once you figure out the sound that you want and how things are working, the bigger the computer, it's absolutely true, the bigger the computer, the more it can handle. And in the more realistic or analog your mixing session will become. So that is hugely important. That's why Pro Tools HDX has the price tag it does. It makes the workflow easier. But let's get into the mixing process. The number one mistake that I hear in mixing at all is guys will solo out just one instrument and make it better. And that's great for a season, but what starts to happen is you start to make everything sound good on its own, but it never sounds good together. So I'm going to go to the most, let's just put it this way, the most visible to see as far as a change. And a lot of times when you do this, like a client might go, wait a minute, but trust me, if you're smart, you will quit the wait a minute stuff. So in this case, I'm going to turn this off. We automated this, but we're going to go into this instrument group together, and you're going to listen to the blend. Now, as you heard that second part come in, you might have thought that sounded weak, but there's a reason that we did that, and I'm going to show you. Now, I can take and bring some of that back. Now there's a reason I'm showing you this. Like, I just boosted 197 hertz, but there's a reason that that's not in there in this arrangement, and I'll show you why. Because the goal in mixing is to create space between instruments. This synth is taking up, from 1K up into 16K. That synth was meant to have that kind of energy. If these instruments weren't here, then I probably wouldn't EQ it that way. I would probably leave it fat and big, and that would be the main instrument. Now, if these, like I said, if these instruments weren't part of this song, then that's a totally different song. And we can go the other route with it. But in this case, the way that the song plays out with these instruments, because of this. This is why. Because the bass, the kick, the snare are taking up that synth range. Now we could do this. Let's totally start from scratch on this synth. Let's totally just start from scratch and listen to what we got here. So I could just EQ it a little bit, and like in this example, but it's going to be really muffled with all the other stuff. Now, I'm actually listening to the instrument as I'm playing it, okay? So I'm listening to the bass and the kick and the snare as I'm EQing the synth, if that makes any sense. So in mixing, you're trying to make everything work together. In this case, we got it working. Dude, does everybody gotta call me while I'm doing a video? So anyways, we just EQ'd that synth, and that's a totally different EQ. And this video is all about when you send your stuff to a mixing engineer, and I hope to God every mixing engineer on the planet agrees with me here and says, wow, this guy really hit it on the head. You just saw two different ways of EQing this. You saw this route, which the guys say, that's the song. That's the song right there, Doug. That's the sound that I'm looking for. Or you could have the totally different one where I just used a chain of stuff. So we got this simple one that you would think was not as good, but it is. And then this one where it's like totally altered to sound good with everything. Because now watch what happens here when we add all this stuff in. These share the same frequency ranges, and they're played the same. So watch. So I'm letting you listen to that so you can see how this was so awesome, dude. It sounded so cool. Now here's the thing. This is just coming in on the chorus. Now I've had to make the executive decision in my mind that this does not need to be there the whole entire track. So what we did was this. So we put read on and we actually automated it. And when we automate it, let that instrumentation come through. Let's talk about the kick drum and snare drum a little bit in the bass line. The thing about this, you can always make that blend better. Always. I mean, you can sit here for hours making that blend better. But one thing that I noticed with the bass is a little bit of the low end. Listen to it as I roll it off and watch where the kick drum goes. But I like it. That's the one that's muffled. That's 168. So in a untreated room, you're not really going to hear that. I'm dead serious. Like, I would never hear that without these bass traps in here. I'd have sat here for 45 hours going, what in the world, dude? I can't hear what I'm doing. And then you don't even hear the different notes of the bass. So that right there is another cleanness. So when we talk about, like when a guy says, well, how much for mixing and mastering? This is like the sky's the limit, dude. How great do you want it to sound? I mean, this right here is more than suitable. If you look at this session, I mean, with everything going on, it's more than is this seriously happening today? I mean, I got everybody calling in today. I better get done with this video so I can actually get some work. Anyways, so yeah, now you're seeing the fundamental foundation. Let me back up the camera and show you exactly what we're doing here. We have multiple EQs, multiple limiting, and different dynamic control. I wanted to focus on EQ and getting space. Everything in this song has created space now. So the bass line with that thing we just did for 162 hertz brought 162 out on the kick drum. It seems easy when I talk about it this way, but man, when you don't know what to do and what direction to go, and you're not around a person that understands this, you can get really lost in a mix. And you know, there's subtle things that we do. Sometimes a sound doesn't need much. Like this one, we just boosted 4K. I mean, we didn't touch much more. I mean, you don't have to do this to every track. You got to make decisions on what tracks need the most attention. And here's the sad part. There's always this instrument. This is the pop brass that I was showing you at the beginning. There's always this instrument in a recording. Always. That just is way too much. I mean, it's way too much, and we have to make an executive decision. And what I do in mixing is I'll bounce one with this that we did to it. Just a subtle low-end cut. I love this channel strip for cutting, by the way. It's just so smooth when it does it. And then you have the whole entire chain here with a Maslick and everything that just makes it sound really, really, really small, but it becomes like a high-end audio effect, and it leaves all the information here. And then this song doesn't even have a vocal yet, so this might change again when a vocal comes in, because you might find out that the brass sounds better this way than it does with the other setup we did. So yeah, this is mixing. Mixing can make or break an album. It really can, because then now you have with all these plugins, and what they do is they create space. But the number one goal in mixing is not to make everything sound good by itself. It's to make everything sound good in context. It's to make like we just showed, the kick drum. do something here real quick. I didn't show you this. This is a gate. When I take this gate off, watch how much bigger the sound gets. A gate works backwards from a compressor. So what it's doing is when it detects no sound, it gates the sound. It cuts it out. It shuts the door on it. When the door opens back up, when that sound reaches past this point, it opens back up. So for kick drums, bass lines, vocals, anything that you want to pronunciate the attack time a little bit more, what you're going to do is gate it. And we could actually bring this up. Take it off. It just tightens it up a little more, takes out some of the low end noise. It cuts it off a little bit shorter, lets the snare come through. And that was really in conjunction with this. We didn't want all this stuff because these are lower melodic. Let's take that off. Let's do this one more time. There's a reason I did this. I mean, it might sound stupid, but sometimes you sort of confuse yourself. You can hear everything down here a lot better, and that's a total altercation of that instrument. And people like Jimmy are very flexible, and I would say that and highly recommend anybody out there that's watching this video that looks to get their music mixed, be flexible and open with an engineer. And if you hear something like this and say, Doug, you know, that pop brass is just way too brassy for me, dude, I wanted it to be like a low instrument, then we're gonna have to take everything down here and decide, well, why did we use this instrument, or what did we do here? And we can really get into some serious mixing sessions. In this case, you know, Jimmy was out for one purpose. He wants it loud, big. He wants it to sound better. He wants it to sound more, you know, audibly noticeable, you know, on bigger systems, smaller systems. And that was the main purpose of this. So, yeah, that is a EQ curve on that synth where you do this and bypass this and keep that flat. You got all this information taking up the same exact space that this stuff was. And then to add on top of that, you got drums and things that are going to bring up that frequency range as well. So a lot of the time, especially in the home-based studios, it's not that Jimmy's like some on normal, doesn't know what he's doing producer, because that's by far the case. He is doing what every other producer on this planet does. They make music based on feel and the way that they felt and the way that they were going for it. Every producer out there, this is why we have mixing engineers. This is what our job is. Our job is to pick and choose what frequency range that individual instrument should take up. And then if, you know, there's certain producers out there that say, don't touch my sound. And in that case, we're going to really, you know, pay attention to what you're doing. We're not going to do these huge altercations. We're not going to change this like that, which in our mind we think it's sort of stupid that we don't, but sometimes you want that fat, muffled sound, and that's part of music. But you'll look at some of the greatest bands on this planet, and you notice their arrangements of instruments, whether it was a producer in the studio, whether it was a sound engineer in the studio, but they all come to agree that each piece of this puzzle, each channel has a purpose. And when you stop thinking that way, that's when productions get screwed up, because you'll just start adding stuff, and if you don't have a purpose to add it, Songs are very interesting when it comes to that. Professional songs, every piece has a part to play. And when you start just sort of, dropping the ball on that and just sort of putting things in this case, Jimmy's actually he's very talented when it comes to finding what sounds he wants. And that's what I said. You should never judge a person based on. I just see too many people doing this, and this is why I engineer alone a lot. But I'm not here to judge somebody's music like on, oh, it's cool or it's not cool. I learned from a great engineer at the recording workshop that I attended that you should never cast judgment on a person that's giving it their all and making production. Because, I mean, a million times out of a million times, the people that, like, it's like the hot girl in high school. I meant the ugly girl. She becomes the hot girl. It's the same thing with producers. It's the same thing with musicians. We can always become better. It's the same thing with mixing engineers. Everybody can become better at their craft. So, yeah, with that being said, this is an intro to mixing with EQ. This is how EQ works. This is how you get space between instruments. This is how you start to build a foundation. And we can mix this thing for another 2 days. I mean, it's the sky's the limit, but you paint a picture so much it will turn brown. So you always have to be on the alert, and we'll save this as recovered nice. So, just a few tips out there. Hopefully you enjoyed this video a little bit, gave you a little leadway into what mixing's all about, and we're gonna try to put it on YouTube.
Red lips, Campari, kiss me